It's 8.4, last lesson of the semester, step functions. So before I go into the steps, let me go actually to the word problem. I'm kind of going backwards, but it's better if I explain it this way. Let's say there's a hotel and they charge you $100 per night to stay at this hotel. So you stay one night, that's 100, two nights, 200, 300, 400, 500, right? And it goes on. You don't need to do them all. It goes on. Um, in a graph, it would look like this. Well, there's one point, there's the next point, there's the next point, there's the next point, and so on, right? Now, normally I would tell you, okay, draw a straight line, but guys, that would be wrong here. This would be wrong. Let me explain why. If I were to connect these points, right here, if I were to connect them right here, what I'm saying is, if you stayed 1.5 nights, you would get charged $150. And that is not true. Nope. The way it works at a hotel, there's a checkout time. If you do not leave the hotel by that checkout time, they will charge you an extra night because they can't clean the room up and rent it out to the next person. So you get charged for 2 nights for missing your checkout time. So the way it works is like this. When you check in, which is usually around the afternoon, right? Right after you check in, you're getting charged for that night, $100. Now, if there's an emergency and you have to leave like at 10 o'clock, 10 p.m., doesn't matter. You have the room for the whole night. You're being charged for it even if you leave early. So you're still going to be charged $100. Then, after your checkout time, usually like around 10 or 11, if you miss that, you're not going to be charged for 2 nights. So even if you're not there for 2 nights, you're there for 1.5, you're going to be charged for 2 nights, $200. And it continues. If you miss the checkout time here, you're going to be charged for the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. So if you miss that day checkout, you're going to get charged for the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. So these are called step functions because obviously they look like steps. Now there's 2 kinds that we're going to talk about: ceiling functions and floor functions. Okay, floor, not flower. My bad. And here's how it goes. You're basically gonna not use decimals. You're gonna have to round your decimals up or down. And if you can guess, ceiling means you're rounding up, floor means you're rounding down. So for example, these numbers. If you see these symbols for ceiling, you're gonna round that up to 4, to 13, to 2. But if it's a floor function, you're gonna round this down. 3, 12, 1. So you see there's a difference in what you'll get depending on what kind of function you're dealing with. So you have to be really careful when you're looking at a problem. Okay, so let's do a word problem now. Okay, so we have this. How much would you expect to spend if you rent a karaoke machine from 8 a.m. to 7:30 p.m.? Now they have a graph there to show you how the rental machine works, and they give you the price for $30 for the first hour, $10 for every hour after that. Now it makes sense. For the first hour, it stays flat at $30 right there at the beginning. But then after 1 hour, you're going to get charged $40. Then after the second hour, $50. Then $60, $70. So as soon as you miss, after you pass the first hour, then you're moving up in price. All right. So if we take a look at that, let's say you rented it for 2.5. Let's say you had it for 2.5 hours. Well, how much are you going to get charged? Well, if you look at that, 2.5 would be in between 2 and 3. You're going to be charged $50, right? Is that $50? 2.5, right? So let's take a look at it. I wish I had a cursor so I can show you. But if you look at the graph right here, right? Look at the graph up here. If you're at 2.5, you're going to be charged $50. $50. So once you go into that 2-hour mark, you're going to get charged $10 more for that. Okay. So think about that. If you're paying $50, you got charged $30 at first for the first hour. You got charged $30. Then you got 1 hour, an extra charge, 10 bucks. Now you had it for 2 hours. You're going to the third hour. That's another hour over. That's how they charge you 50. So you're at 2 hours after the price. You're getting charged for 2 hours because you haven't gone into 3 yet. So the question would be, would this be a floor? Would this be ceiling? Would your X, would it be marked like this, or would it be marked like this? Well, I'm thinking since they only charged you for 2, that they're not using the 0.5, they're rounding down. So if you wrote a function for this, okay? $10 X plus 30. Now if you notice, I'm using y equals mx plus b. That's what I'm using. I'm using y equals mx plus b. I'm just taking the number and I'm rounding it down. So 2.5 is really just going to be 2. So when I plug in that number in here, it's going to come out to 50 bucks. And that's kind of how the word problem works, okay? Let's take another case. Let's do another word problem, okay? Let's say the buses at school break down, so you have to drive cars to get players to soccer games, basketball games, volleyball games, right? So let's first imagine that you have a function with a number of players. You don't know how many players there are, but if you're taking cars, you need one driver who's licensed and who's older than 25. That means your students can't drive. How many people can you fit per car then? Probably 4 if you really squeeze them in. So you're going to have to take your students, divide them by 4 to figure out how many cars you need. Now, are you going to round this number up or are you going to round it down? Because when you put this into, when you divide numbers, you're going to get decimals. For example, if I plug in 10 students, let's say I have 10 students over 4. If I do this or this, here's what we're dealing with. This would be 2.5, 2.5. Now, this is supposed to represent how many cars we have. So this would be 3, this would be 2. So let's think about that. You have 10 players, do you need 3 cars or 2 cars? You need 3. You need 3 cars. You don't have half a car, and if you only use 2 cars, you're going to be short 2 players. So the best thing to do in this function is to round it up when you're done working with it. So let's say you take an entire football team, right? Let's say your football team has 39 people, right? You're going to take that number, divide it, and you're going to get some kind of decimal, something like 9.7 or 9.8. Okay, are you going to get 9 cars or 10 cars? No, you're going to round up. You need 10 cars, just barely. So your function, the way you decide your function, you have to logically think about it. What makes the most sense for those situations?